Hi all, Miss Woodward here. I hope you and your families are doing well at this difficult time and are all safe. I have recently seen a technique online that could be adapted to suit textiles and thought I'd do a little video just to show you the technique. It is actually a very simple technique and can be done with equipment and materials that you more than likely have lying around at home. This is a collage technique which uses magazine images or cutouts to create a print which you can transfer onto fabric. It does take a bit of time, especially one of the further steps I will show you. However, if you do follow the steps correctly, by the end of the video, you should have a lovely print on fabric, which you can then embellish using free machine embroidery, hand embroidery, adding beading, sequins, etc. That could potentially go into your coursework and really help support your portfolio. For this technique, you are going to need several different pieces of equipment. The first thing you're going to need are magazines. You will be using images out of these magazines to create your collage. If your theme is natural form or gardens, landscapes, then you will need to select images from the magazines that link to your theme. If your pictures do not link to your theme, then this will not be able to go into your coursework as it will not be relevant. Please make sure you use imagery that is relevant to your current textiles project. Secondly, you will need a pair of scissors, a roll of sellotape, an A4 piece of fabric big enough for your collage. I do suggest using a cotton-based fabric. At home you could use a bedsheet or an old shirt. Anything really that's a woven fabric, as long as it is not a stretchy material like a t-shirt, because when putting your print onto your fabric using the iron, it would not lay flat and it wouldn't be as effective. So please use a cotton-based fabric. You will also need a damp sponge and potentially a little bowl of water, an iron and an ironing board. Your iron will have to be set to temperature 2 or 2 little dots, just the medium temperature, and you will need an ironing board, some greaseproof paper or parchment paper, a heavy book, and this is just to hold your print in place after it's been heated, and embroidery thread and a needle. That is actually optional at the moment, but obviously once we get back into school you will be asked to embellish these, so you could use an machine embroidery or hand embroidery, or you could add beads and sequins to embellish your sample. But if you do not have that at home, do not worry, that can be done in school when we're back. After collecting all of your equipment, you're going to start with the first step. The first step is for you to go through the magazines and to find images that inspire and interest you. Remember, they must link to your theme. By now, you should have also looked at some of textile artists' work and should have an idea of what you want to do in the style of them and in the style of their work. Therefore, finding images linking to that would also be quite a good starting point. You could also find some images that use harmonious colours, harmonious meaning colours that are next to each other on the colour wheel, for instance, green, blue, purple. And that's what I have used, and you will see that in the picture. Or complementary colours, and these are colours that work well together and are opposite on the colour wheel. For instance, blue and orange, green and red, and yellow and purple. So as you can see, I have chosen a flower theme and used a range of harmonious colours, being blues, greens and purples. We use magazine paper because it's a glossy paper, and this works better when melting this onto your fabric. If you were to use your printers at home and use your own photographs, the ink you use would not adhere as well to the fabric. So after you've found your images, I've selected about 4. You want to cut out some of the focal points. So I've got my base image and then I've got 3 other flowers that I've cut out. I am then going to have a little play with composition meaning layout, overlapping some, putting them behind the other to see what I think looks best for my collage. I've even got some hanging off the edge, and I think that does look quite effective. After you have created the perfect composition for your sample and you have them all laid in the correct position, you can begin to add the sellotape. I do suggest maybe just making sure your windows are closed so no gusts of winds come and blow these off the table or onto the floor. So after they're all in position, you can begin to add your first piece of sellotape. I would suggest starting vertically, so going straight down from top to bottom. You want to lay your first piece of sellotape with an overlap onto the table or whatever you're sticking this onto at the moment. So you can see on my image I have just stuck it to my coffee table. I would start at the left edge of your collage and work to your right. If you're left-handed, you might want to start right to left, but this is what I found easiest. Cut off a piece of sellotape that is long enough to hang at least 1 centimetre over the top of your composition or your collage and over the bottom, as shown in my example. When pressing the sellotape down, make sure you do it quite slowly because you don't want little gathers or bubbles to form underneath the tape. Once your first piece of tape has been laid down smoothly, you can now apply your second piece of tape, again going vertically and next to the piece you've just laid. However, you need to overlap your sellotape by about 3 mil roughly, and this is so when we take the paper off, we do not lose any of the image. So I would definitely suggest about 3mm overlap on your tape as shown in my example. After you've successfully added your second piece of tape, you need to continue adding tape vertically to the rest of your collage, making sure you overlap. After you have applied all the sellotape overlapping vertically, you must do this again now but working horizontally. As you can see, I have started from the bottom of my images and I'm working towards the top, ensuring I've got that 3mm overlap between both pieces of tape and also a little bit hanging over either edge of my collage. You will see you do get a sort of lattice effect pattern, and that is what we're aiming for. Once you have finished applying the sellotape horizontally to your collage and you have that lattice effect over the whole of your composition, you can slowly begin to peel your collage off of the table or the surface you've stuck it to. You can see here in my video, I'm starting at the bottom left-hand corner and working diagonally up. For this section here, you need to be very, very slow and take your time easing the tape off the table or the surface, as you do not want to rip everything you've just done. Once you have managed to take your collage off of the surface and you're holding it up, you will see frayed pieces of sellotape around the outside of your collage. You can now use your scissors to trim away any excess sellotape, ensuring that you do not cut into your collage. However, now is quite a good time to straighten some edges if they're not straight. This next step can get quite messy, so if you're working on a table, you might want to get a tray or something else to work on just so things don't get too messy. I am going to continue working on my coffee table, but please just be aware of the mess that this may create. So you will begin with turning your print over so the sellotape side is face down onto your surface. You will then need to take your damp sponge and slowly start to press that onto the back of your print. If you use circular motions, this will help to ease and disintegrate the rest of the paper. As shown in my pictures below, when you put the water onto the sponge, please ensure that it's not wringing wet and it is just damp, and you will see your paper start to change colour. It will go slightly darker. Once that has happened, use circle motions to rub away the paper. You need to be really, really gentle and slow with this step because we do not want to lose any of the ink from the image. So you must be slow to rub away the paper. You will see the fibres start to come off and the paper start to disintegrate, and this is what we are after. As seen in my pictures below, you can see that it does take a bit of time, but it does come off as long as you work very, very slowly. After all the paper has dissolved, you can use a tea towel to dry the sellotape print. However, you must be careful not to rub the print too hard because you will lose some of that print, and therefore I do suggest just dabbing it gently with your hand to dry the print off. If you want to use a hairdryer or something to dry like that, this is completely fine, but just do it on the coolest setting. After your print is completely dry, you should be able to hold it up to the light and it should be translucent. As you can see from my example, you can see my hand through the print, and this is what we're aiming for. If you cannot see your hand through the print, then there will still be paper on the collage that needs to be removed. If the paper is on when you're trying to fuse this onto your fabric, it will not fuse. So all of the paper must be removed before. The next step is using the iron and the ironing board, so please just ask parents and carers before using them. You will need to set your iron to a medium temperature. Some of your irons may have little dots indicating the coolest heat with 1 and the hottest heat with 3, and therefore you would need to find the middle temperature. This is really important as a high temperature can cause the sellotape to burn, as you will see with mine shortly. Once your iron is switched on, please make sure you turn off the steam function, as you can see in the image below, as steam getting through to your sellotape would cause bubbles and it would not fuse properly to your fabric. Once you have set your iron to the correct temperature and you've successfully turned off the steam, you will need to get your ironing board out. Once you have your ironing board out, you can begin placing your fabric and your collage onto the ironing board. First, start with a piece of grease-proof paper and lay that on top of your ironing board. Secondly, you can add your cotton piece of fabric. Third, you will add your print. It is very important for your print to be sellotape side down onto your fabric, as that is the side we are melting. And then another piece of paper on top of your print, and that will just help protect the iron from getting plastic melted onto the hot plate, just like we do in school when we do fusion. We have that grease-proof paper sandwich almost. Once you have everything into position, you can switch the iron on, if you haven't already, and begin to iron your print. I would suggest holding the iron for about 8 seconds and then moving it to the next space. Just please don't leave it for too long because it will burn if you leave it in the same position for a long amount of time. After you've gone over your fabric, you can have a little look to see if your print has fused to your fabric. If it hasn't, you can just keep repeating these steps until it does. But if it has started sticking down to your piece of fabric, you can then turn the iron off, leave the top piece of greaseproof paper on, and quickly get your heavy book. Your heavy book can be sat on top of the greaseproof paper and your print, and allowing it to cool down with something heavy on top applying pressure will help this fuse to your fabric. Again, if your print has not fused properly yet, just use the iron again until this does happen. But just be aware, holding it in the same position for a long amount of time will cause it to burn, like shown in my example. Once you feel confident that your print has worked, you can take the book off of your greaseproof paper and see if your print has fused to your fabric. Again, if it hasn't fused just yet, you can still go back and use the iron. Just be careful, remember that it's hot, to help and to add more heat to help this fuse to your fabric. Just take your time. We do not want to rush this now and ruin all the hard work, so just take your time, it will eventually get there. Once it has fused correctly to your fabric, this is kind of your finished item as such. Your print that you've created has now been fused onto fabric. You could, if you have the equipment at home, begin to add some hand embroidery. You could do French knots, satin stitch, chain stitch, running stitch, the lace running stitch, anything like that to embellish your sample. If you have a machine at home and you're confident in free machine embroidery, you could work on top of this print in free machine embroidery. You could also begin to add beads and sequins if you have that at home. But if you do not have that at home, it is completely fine, and we will do this once we return to school in lesson or intervention, so please do not worry. Added embellishments will help add texture, detail and pattern to your sample, and also make this a bit more interesting for the examiner when they come to look at your work in Year 11. If you have a camera, it'd be really, really great to take a photograph of this and send it to me so that I can see what practical work you've been doing at home, and we can add it to your tracker that I am creating whilst we are off in this lockdown period. And that's it. It is a very simple technique. Yes, it may look a little bit more difficult, but in fact it's very, very simple as long as you have everything kind of ready for you to go. So please have a go at this technique. I strongly recommend it, and I think it will help you recap some of those skills we learned earlier on in the year. I look forward to seeing images of these if you have a go. And like I said, if it doesn't go to plan, it really doesn't matter. Do not be disheartened. In textiles, in any art subject, in fact, you will find out that mistakes are what makes us a better learner and makes us a better person. So please do not worry. These can be rectified. We can put these in as experiments and we can try again. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll hopefully see you in the school soon.